if we are approaching the singularity, this is all going to happen so much faster than we could ever imagine. The idea of thinking in a 50-year time frame right now is such a long, that's like linear thinking. We're about to experience an exponential for the first time in humanity. And so I think Bitcoin's value, whether it becomes the payments infrastructure of the world or the self-sovereign, savings vehicle that you exchange it for stables, or, the thing that doesn't change is that its value is going to grow on in a closer, in an ever closer connection of one-to-one between the technological deflation that is created and Bitcoin's buying power.
It all comes down to computers communicating.
The information superhighway can be a confusing mix of on-ramps and off-ramps.
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold.
Is it still rat poison?
Probably rat poison squared.
We need to get into the world of, okay, this is actually foundational technology.
What the Internet of Money does is it creates a single network which can do a microtransaction to a gigatransaction.
The Internet is going to be one of the major forces for reducing the role of government. The one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable e-cash.
VC veteran trick where you're just like, you're late. I'm going to use this next time. Be like, I'm in the meeting. And then they'll be like, what do you mean? I'm like, oh, the wrong link. I jump in, and then people believe it. But that makes sense. That fucking Google Meet always messes me up for other things.
No, my bad. No, Liam, you sent it. I just didn't see it in the thread. My bad.
How you doing?
Good to see you, Cam. It's been a while. I was looking back. The last time you were on the show was May of 2025. I think the Bitcoin price was comfortably over 100K. Lots has changed. Lots has happened over that time period. I was mentioning to Liam before you guys joined. Today is Groundhog's Day. It does feel kind of apropos. Back in the 70s, hanging out, chopping around. But good to have you back on. It's been too long since we caught up. How you doing, man?
I don't even want to hear whatever my predictions were on the last spot. Yeah, what a year! Woo! This is it's not for the faint of heart. But the weird thing is it feels like I was telling somebody the other day. I was like, I didn't anticipate the scenario where I got every single thing that I wanted to happen except price. That didn't register. So
I didn't even know we were recording, and then I realized a minute in that we were recording. I was flipping screens, and
welcome back to Final Settlement. We're back.
Not to pour whatever on the wound.
Salt on the wound.
Not to pour salt on the wound, but out of everyone I know, Cam might be the Bitcoin orange pillar of all orange pillars, or attempted orange pillar, because I know there's a deep network that you have, and so there must be some real we just forced to talk to people that are already in the industry that are interested or whatever, but you're out there doing the Lord's work, evangelizing, and I'm sure you've gotten some texts about what the hell's going on.
Oh yeah, I'm taking grenades. I have to deal with that because I've spent the last, I don't know, well into the last 3 years, it's been just an utter obsession of mine to just make sure that all my, friends, family, loved ones have exposure, et cetera. And it does weigh heavy when you can't teleport 10 years of exposure to an asset into somebody that just got into it. And so it's like words aren't enough, but I think I do a pretty good job of setting the expectation that this is, very long it's a long-term game, but
You just have to tell them non-consensus right. That's my business. Non-consensus right. And this is non-consensus. I'm right. I'll take a step back and let's all relax.
yeah, I mean, exactly.
So his internet has been a little bit out, but we've been working with each other so long that I could probably finish the sentence that we saw everything happen from the new administration, all the tailwinds except for price, which has been pretty wild to see play out. I think everyone is a little shell shocked. I was joking with mutual friends of ours that have been around this space for 5-10 years, and they're in pain. And I was like, well, take a step back. Because I think pain is really all relative, right? So when you're expecting all of these things to come once everyone's friendly to this and they don't, you're like, well, what the hell? Like you start to have to recheck your priors and assumptions. And I was telling them last night, take a step back and like think about folks that came in the last 5 years, right? Because everyone's seen those numbers in 21. That was like 67, we're right around those all-time highs 5 years later. And you have all the crazy quantum and just everything else that happened over the weekend. We probably don't need to get into with the Epstein list. But the point being is there's probably real people right now being like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Is this thing actually a viable unit to be a world reserve currency? We obviously know it is. We obviously know nothing's changed, but we have to put ourselves back in that position. There's a lot of people questioning what's going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what I go back to is nothing has changed. Literally nothing has changed. What brought me to Bitcoin in the first place was the lack of counterparty risk. In a world that is just constantly changing, everything's changing, and then you have this thing that doesn't change, and so yeah, it's frustrating. But feature not a bug, right? The volatility of this thing is, if it just went to 1 million right now, that probably that wouldn't be a good thing. And so it'd be a good thing for us. It wouldn't be a good thing for, a lot of the people that we want to have exposure. So anyway.
Yeah, a lot of people I think are a little bit frustrated too because the debasement trade went extremely mainstream. Everything that they've been talking about deficits, debt, and understanding that there is just an insane amount of fraud, waste, and abuse in the system is out there, but they got the asset completely wrong. But there is some underlying reason and rationale to be a little bit excited, despite the fact that our asset class did not benefit from it at all, which is just the fact that there are folks out there who are putting on this trade that are just putting on the trade that's probably larger than the market cap of Bitcoin as a whole right now. They can't put on that same trade with Bitcoin because it either exposes who the counterparties are that are buying that much, as well as just like it doesn't necessarily move the needle for them quite as much as buying gold in general. So it's definitely a long game here, but I think that's one of the things that frustrated a lot of people this year too.
Yeah, well, I mean, the correlation between Bitcoin and gold is like non-existent, and so I think it's like 0.15 or something. I heard over the last 7 or 8 years, and so this was a reality that I didn't think it would happen this way, but gold running first, everything that we're seeing with fraud, I just feel like every narrative is kind of pointing towards we can't trust institutions, and I know that this is ultimately going to benefit the thing that is outside of all of those things. And then with what I do every day, spend my time on with investing in technology companies. What's happening and what is about to happen over the next few years is just going to make everything so much more relevant in the Bitcoin thesis. And so, yeah, painful short term, but nothing's changed.
Yeah, that's why we're excited to have you on. We've been getting more into traditional tech, traditional investing, how it's going to mirror into Bitcoin. So we really kick off with a lot of the things that are happening on the market structure. There's multiple tailwinds for Bitcoin. One of the big ones, obviously, which you referenced, debasement, fraud, corruption, counterparty risk. But then there's the other bunch of look at as positive is the plumbing and rail, what it means to maintain all these different tailwinds. aren't priced in. Just last week, a great example, and we've covered it with Morgan Stanley. Like, people see the headlines with Morgan Stanley, they don't realize they're going all in around building wallet infrastructure. Amy Oldenburg, we've known for a while. She was head of their emerging markets practice. She'd been deeply interested in digital assets. She's not a joke. She's leading that practice. But a lot of other things we'll cover to kick off, and then we'll go into some of the AI and what you're doing at Brickyard, because I saw some interesting stuff today on LinkedIn. And we might get a little distracted because there's some nude guys behind you, but we'll make sure to not to lose it. I don't know if you showed. There's a guy running around behind you with his shirt off.
Oh gosh, this is a madhouse. Brickyard is an absolute madhouse.
I love it. Liam, where should we start? I know we lost Brian for a sec, but we can go.
Yeah, there's a ton that's kind of happened over the past week or so. There are a couple big fundraisers. White House meeting this week regarding bank and crypto next steps in legislation. We can either start there or with some of the fundraisers.
Yeah, let's start there. What's your take, at least, and feel free to pass on any of these, but I think this is going to be a big deal. We've obviously seen it hang around from a market structure perspective. There's a lot of thoughts in the industry with what's going on around the Clarity Act. Provides a lot of clarity, no pun intended, for the industry to kind of move forward. Any thoughts on that? Not really.
Pass.
Yeah. I think the main thing just to call out here is, I think as recent as last week, Polymarket added like 39% likelihood this year. And I don't see how it doesn't get passed this year, in the sense of a lot of this has to do with the administration, what they need from stablecoins, mainly treasuries, and then also being this quote unquote crypto digital asset leader. I think it gets passed probably in the first half of this year. And why that matters for anything we'll talk about today is because from a capital markets perspective, IPOs, firms, institutional investors, like, this just adds more inertia into, like, this thing's not going away. There's more clarity on the actual market structure, SEC versus CFTC. So I do think it's a big deal from capital markets perspective, and it's in the background, but I do expect this will be a positive catalyst for just more momentum if this thing actually gets through.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will mention is, we want this to pass, but we want it to pass. We want a good bill. And I think if we had just passed it to pass it, and the banks, won the battle against stables, and, not being able to pass yield to customers, that would not be good. And I think, Brian Armstrong, it is, think what you will, but I think he's right in that we've got to get this thing right. And there's a battle happening at the top rung of, the banks and stables, and this needs to be the right legislation.
100%. I do think that something will get passed, because I think that there's a lot of demand to dollarize the world through stablecoins, and just the powers that be essentially really want that to happen. We know all the situation about the debt and deficits, and there are, the gold going into the mainstream as much as it has been, just because of the debasement trade and lack of trust in the U.S. dollar as an institution. And I think that this is definitely the way that that there is going to be a lot longer extension of the U.S. dollar. And so I think that regardless of what I would hope, I think it will probably get passed soon too.
Brian, we were just covering some of the market structure bill, but going into, just to cover, we touched a little bit about this kicking off, but around, it's pretty wild. 4 consecutive months red. I think only one other time in Bitcoin's history this has happened. And there was, notes on sentiment from, like, even worse than Mt. Gox. I think there's a lot of multiple things. There's multiple things happening, from crypto really not having its bull run this cycle as compared to gold. So there's just that notion. And then a lot of the expectations, but, like, what's your house view around more like liquidity in general? Because gold just wiped off, like, between gold and silver, I think like $5 to $10 trillion in the past, like, 48 hours. Curious just how you're thinking about it from a flows perspective, and, like, the analysis from Bitcoin the past couple months.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys have seen the chart of, like, the divergence of basically M2 liquidity, which had been pretty tightly correlated with Bitcoin historically, there's just a massive divergence right now over the past 4 or 5 months, and all of these other asset classes have basically participated in that rally, whether it's stocks, gold, other precious metals, and it just really hasn't kept up with that. And I do think, you guys just mentioned you were talking about the market structure bill. I do think that that is a contributing factor, that it was a known potential catalyst that that piece of legislation would be signed, and basically there's more debate internally and sort of hot button issues, particularly around the stablecoin stuff and the yield, that has held that up. And I think in a lot of people's eyes that has been an overhang. The other thing I would mention is, like, I do think it's just like people still anchoring to cycles and basically thinking, like, looking at the calendar and saying, oh, it's now a bear market year. So basically trying to front run that trade to some extent. So I think there have been a lot of sell pressure due to that dynamic. But it is pretty astounding to see, before I cut out earlier, what I was going to say was, like, that is the story of 2025 to me, is like strengthening fundamentals underneath, whether it's regulatory, administration, infrastructure, a lot of companies going public, a lot of M&A activity, a lot of banking partnerships and integrations, and price just hasn't been there. But that's kind of the story of investing in general, right? Like this notion of, Benjamin Graham talking about the voting machine versus the weighing machine. The voting machine is short-term thinking around, well, basically looking at market news, headlines, various things, and ascribing that to price dynamics, when over the long term, it's really more of a weighing machine where, like, those fundamentals actually matter a lot more. And so I think it is just, it's probably cliche at this point to say zoom out, but like that is genuinely kind of what is necessary at this point in time, with, being back around 80K. The reality is, like, the sort of urgency and need for a non-sovereign, decentralized digital store of value asset is never stronger. And I think you guys were talking a little bit about, like, just the deterioration in trust in institutions. I think, like, that was also the story of 2025 to me. And if you pair that with sort of Bitcoin's fundamental value prop, it's never been clearer that we need something like Bitcoin to exist. And I think the inertia around gold makes sense. And we've talked about it, like central banks, sovereigns stacking gold makes sense in that they're just more familiar with it. It's what they're conditioned to stack in times of uncertainty, in times of institutional trust erosion. And so the bid hasn't been there for Bitcoin, but I think there's other overhangs, whether it's the 4-year cycle thinking, a lot of the quantum FUD from the end of last year. Like, there's things that have sort of been headwinds that, again, are short term in nature and sort of market noise. When if you're actually looking at, like, what this thing is, deeply understanding it, and the place that it can be positioned in this new world that we're headed to, like, it makes total sense. But yeah, the liquidity dynamics are interesting. Like, I think the other part of the sell off over the past few days was the naming of Kevin Warsh as the new Fed chair, which people perceive him to be more hawkish than dovish. He's spoken out historically against quantitative easing, but on the other hand, you have his former boss Stanley Druckenmiller, who is a big Bitcoin bull, saying, like, calm down, don't think of him so much as a hawk. He's really tends to be more dovish, and he intends to cut interest rates as sort of Trump wants. So I think part of the reaction over the past week and some of the sell-off has been attributable to that. But it's hard to parse. There's a lot of different variables at play right now.
Cam, one of the things you mentioned is about the $1 million coin, and I truthfully believe where we sit today, this may even sound like Coke, but like where we sit today provides a lot more of a view and avenue to get to that versus just wanting to see a large number, or where we think. Like, I think everyone underwrites Bitcoin can be at 500K, $1 million, $5 million because of the principles of finite scarcity as it relates to all other assets. But what Brian alluded to, and what we've seen, and we'll talk about, we don't have to go through all of them, but a lot of, like, what it means to be a bank, stablecoins, digitization of money, the debasement trade, sovereigns, right? Because sovereigns are all competing with each other. And if gold is becoming, as it relates to, M1, M2 or treasuries, a reserve asset, you can start to see how large pools are forming to come into this asset class. And it just requires different catalysts. But it's the difference between being this nice, 5-6 figure asset and actually being a strategic asset. Like, we're not that far away from it. And so I'm curious, like, your thoughts on that. And one other thing just to add is we had Chris Kuiper on, I think like 12 to 18 months ago. And he was referencing when he talks to institutional clients at Fidelity, I think this was in last bear market or whatever we're calling, maybe 22 to 24. And he would say, if you just take away the price and you look at fundamentals, whether it's institutions coming in, offering it, mining activity, transactions, whatever it is, you would think it's at all-time highs. And so, exact example here, if you just looked at everything that's happened in vacuum, you would think that this price is 250,000 if you didn't know the numbers. So the delta is just waiting for the catch up. And that really ties into business building, because I know we're holding Bitcoin Mag, so we're looking at it from that lens. But imagine putting your founder hat on, and if you could build products and services today, because people have to pay premiums on the BTC price for those goods because we know they're going to need it. It's just a very opportune time to really be building infrastructure in this space.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, the way I am viewing, I may be jumping topics here, but what we've always known about Bitcoin is it does the exact opposite of what everybody thinks, including, Bitcoin bulls that are certain about where things are going to go. I think the only relevant forward-looking topic right now is what is about to happen to deflationary forces in the economy, not just in the U.S. but everywhere on Earth. And I don't know if you guys watched the Moonshots podcast with Peter Diamandis. You guys watch that?
Is that the one you sent a clip of the other day?
Yeah, did you watch that?
I didn't, but I saw the clip.
Okay. Well, my view is this: if whatever you think of Elon is at the upper rung of information privilege on Earth. If the Tiger Woods of 2010 for the world of predicting the future, without question, is Elon, right? He has been able to see the future better than anybody else. He's obviously not just a philosopher, he's an operator with companies in robotics and AI. And what he's saying is we're entering the singularity now. And over the next 2-3 years, the rate of acceleration that we're about to experience is going to be so entirely unprecedented that that the governments all over the world are going to have to print more. He said, verbatim, he's like, these governments will not be able to print enough. The deflationary forces that are about to come with the cost of all software falling to the floor, cost of knowledge falling to the floor, and then the introduction of humanoid robots, the cost of actually moving atoms in meat space is about to fall to the floor. He's predicting every Optimus robot, I can't remember the timeline he set for it, but inside of 5 years, he's saying every Optimus robot is going to be a 10 times better than the best surgeon in any field, with micron level acuity on the actuators on this thing, being able to perform surgery. So he's saying your Optimus robot is going to be able to take your appendix out. And so when you enter a world where these humanoids are going to be able, you want to build a house, you get the raw materials, and humanoids are going to be able to build a house. You want to fly an airplane, if it's not already flying itself, then the Optimus will be able to sit up in the front seat and take you anywhere you want to go. That's the world that we're going to see, not in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, to the next 5-6 years, right? And so he started talking about this topic of universal high income, and basically what he's saying is governments are going to print more and more money he said, I don't think they're even going to be able to print enough money to offset the deflationary gains that we're going to see in the economy. So governments are going to be motivated doing this. So one, they don't default, but two, there's going to be so much buying power that's created through deflationary forces that they can just create all this new money. And it's not just going to be given out as like basic income, like food stamp style. It's going to be given out in such volumes that everybody, the basic, the low watermark in the world is going to be far higher than it is today. So being poor, in 7 years is not going to look anything like being poor today. And it's almost like this, it's like a socialist view of the future where governments are just going to be able to like give out welfare to everybody in, exorbitant amounts. And the puzzling thing is Peter Diamandis is like a hardcore Bitcoiner. And so he's saying all of these things, and Peter, who's friends with Elon, like if it were any of us in that, on that show, we would be like our palms would be sweating to start bringing up Bitcoin, right? And Peter didn't say anything about Bitcoin. And so that to me was a signal that for some reason, Elon doesn't want to be talking about this, because the reality is if there's that kind of money creation that is coming, if you are taking these credit card points that are being just, blanketed out into, across the economy, and you put it into a scarce monetary asset, well, that scarce monetary asset is certainly going to hold and grow its purchasing power faster than a monetary asset that is just being printed into oblivion, even though the baseline of everyday living is going to rise for everybody. But the thing that they're not discussing is like, even in that world of universal high income, that UHI is not going to buy you a 5,000 acre ranch on the coast of Kauai, right? Like it will not buy you. It's not like everybody on earth it will have equality of wealth. There will still be a disparity between, the haves and have-nots, but it's more going to look like the have-nots of the future are going to be like the haves of today, right? And the haves of the future are going to be like, unimaginably wealthy, right? The ability to do things we can't even imagine. And so that's, if you buy into that, if you think that the AI genie is not going back in the bottle, and this is the future, this kind of like connects the dots for me, given the conversation that I was up in Washington a few months ago with David Sachs' team talking about, I thought we were going to be up there to talk about the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And we ended up meeting with his, about half of his team for, over an hour and a half. And all they wanted to talk about were stablecoins. And so that kind of leads me into, okay, I think what is happening here is, we have to have stablecoins to have the velocity of money necessary to be able to distribute this, in a hyper deflationary environment. And Bitcoin, we've all said like stables are the bridge to Bitcoin, right? Like stables are just a proxy for a fiat money. But in that world, you will have people that are taking government issued cuck bucks and exchanging them for, a monetary asset that is scarce and fulfills all, characteristics of money. And that almost certainly will not be gold, because, in that future, what's valuable in a digitized future of AIs working with other AIs and AIs working on behalf of humans for almost all things is scarcity is not enough. It has to actually have be useful in that, so gold is scarce, but it's not useful, right? Bitcoin is scarce and it's useful. You can send it anywhere in the world at the speed of light for free. And so even in a base case of it just being a savings vehicle in this, in this new world, that is going to happen in a huge way. So I guess to come full circle, that's probably the most useful topic is, not deliberating on like, why isn't it moving today? I think that there's games that are being played at the highest rungs of power that are trying to buy time to build the bridge and create access for everybody prior to this, massive transition to a new global monetary order. So anyway, there's my soapbox.
There's a lot there, and I'm glad you went that route because it's easy to talk about the tailwinds, and we can cover a few notable news topics. But this is where I was excited to go this week on market structure, investments in this new world, what's happening with AI. Just quickly before that, because I was doing some research and I want to share it with Brian and anybody listening, because what Cam alluded to on the robot sounds far-fetched, but I was just talking about this last week about these robots are going to be in our house taking care of our kids while cooking the food. And there's a whole order of operation sequential stuff that Elon's always done, all the way from when he launched Tesla and had whatever the main car was, and then he had to sell enough so he could, go and try to go down market. And it really ties into, I don't know what FSD stands for, but it's Tesla's neural nets. So humanoid robot perception, that's where that fulfills. The battery cells from Gigafactory, power dense enough for mobile robots, actuator development for Tesla vehicles, robot joint motors, manufacturing at scale. Tesla already knows how to build millions of complex units. It's also why they were able to get XAI so fully up to speed because of their infrastructure around energy, among other things. And then AI's Grok potential robot intelligence layer. So this stuff's coming. I think, also Amazon's at the top of the game there. But going back to what you said around the Bitcoin component, it's very interesting because this is a cousin of like All In and these other people for years, they never bring up Bitcoin. And the case I would make is similar to yours. It's like they understand it, but they're not incentivized to talk about it because from an LP perspective and everything, it doesn't make any sense to talk about. It's the same reason why like different people we can't name that work at large multi-trillion-dollar asset management firms cannot bring up that bonds are impaired. It's because their whole business model is relying on people holding a large percentage of their wealth in bonds. Yeah. So I was just listening to, I think it was Mark Andreessen talk at, it was Lenny's podcast, the Product Pod, and he was referencing exactly what you're describing in the deflationary world. But they always say, GDP will improve and, whatever the second and third order effects, but they never bring up the debt. And so the common thing will be like, oh, they don't understand money. It's like, no, they probably do understand debt, but it's to your point. This is why the velocity in stable coins will get pushed. The sad part is the reality, they're going to make it very easy and convenient to use stable coins. And a lot of people will, because whether it's your bank account, your doctor's appointment, your mobile card. So there's just going to be, I think, a fraction of like agency. But to your point, the other side of that comes out with like AI money versus stable coins. And I do think there'll be tokenized gold. So they'll try to use these things. But there was recently with all this Molebot and like agents talking to each other, I think that it was referenced that one of them was like talking about Solana and they started to develop its own, like patter about like he was like X my dude, like why would we ever use Solana? This is the agents talking to each other about like thermodynamic money. So I do think all of that tracks. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that because I have a question to ask, but curious if any of that resonates or anything you want to add.
Check out earlyriders.com for all the latest in Bitcoin investment research. Now back to the show.
Yeah, no, I think that all tracks. I mean, agents are going to be operating on behalf of all of us in very short order. What we saw with Moltbot is like this fascinating thing, and it's a mind-blowing thing to watch agents assemble and and argue and land on, go around the merry-go-round of letting everybody be heard, and then somebody coming in at the end and dropping the mic, and then having a bunch of agents actually agree with the best idea. Like, that's crazy. It's crazy to watch that. But this is like the first pitch of the game. Like, this is just the beginning. And, part of the singularity is we cannot imagine a future post post AI, or AGI. And I agree with the idea that I think the next 6 years from now will be more different than today than 1900. Like, the things that we're going to see, and the disruption that we're going to see is going to be massive. I can just see it with our teams at Brickyard. It's the time and cost to produce software today as compared to even like a year or 2 years ago it's like a 50x improvement, right? Like, one or two engineers that that could be product managers that aren't even engineers but understand products, and are now able to build things that would have taken teams of tens of engineers years to build. These things are being built in like a month, right? And this just isn't going to slow down.
Yeah, and maybe so that ties into a question. There was another quote as part of that pod that he was referencing from 1940 to 1970. We're operating on like half of GDP. And then if you go back to like the golden age from 1870 to like 1930, I believe 1940, we're at 1/3. So to your point, like, when we look at a lot of the things that exist, it goes back to the Peter Thiel tweet about, we want to fly in cars or whatever. And all we got was 240 characters. Like, we actually haven't seen productivity. So to your point, like, when these things happen, but I'm curious from your vantage point at Brickyard investing and looking at things, how do you reconcile two parts? One is the notion of like changing tasks versus changing jobs. Because the idea of changing tasks is like, the reference is, if you were a receptionist before, you used to print out the thing, dictate, bring it back. And then now we all just use the computer, and the receptionist or the admin does other things. So that's a changing task, not a job.
Mm-hmm.
But you go from there. So changing jobs, and then just with the landscape of software and things compressing where anybody can vibe code something up. How do you just think about that landscape from an investable perspective?
I think most pure software companies are going to go to zero, or be demonetized in a huge way. With exception to highly regulated industries, products that have some kind of real proprietary data that other competitors can't access. If you're building, voice AI software for dental offices, just the example that I always give, like, none of those companies are going to be valuable. It's going to be a commodity. And so from the investing standpoint, we have to find opportunities that can sidestep the race to the bottom on price in a world where software is getting cheaper and cheaper and faster to build. And the competitive landscape, it's like all barriers are just falling away. And so it's gonna change. A year and a half ago, Balaji, I think, brought up like SaaS is dead, and at first I was like, it's bullshit. Now I'm like, yeah, I think SaaS is dead for the most part, with the exception of like, fintechs that are working in with highly regulated banks or healthcare or et cetera, et cetera. There will be kind of bastions of really, really valuable companies that are able to build awesome products and have a moat. But there's going to be an enormous amount of companies that just have no moat and just get competed away into oblivion.
I wanted to go back to you mentioned the Molt book and Claudebot stuff that over the past few days people have been very excited online about, because I think on one hand it's sort of like the initial signs of what people perceive to be the singularity, right? Like agents going off, doing their own thing, having their own thoughts, coalescing, conversating. But there is some nuance to it, because I've heard the other side of it where it's like there's still a human in the loop to some extent with these bots, where like, the example I had up on the screen earlier where they're talking about the sovereignty of Bitcoin and Nostr as a great idea. The bot that is saying that was originally prompted by a human to say, hey, go orange pill all the other bots. So like there is still some element of human in the loop prompting, but like, what's your take on, I guess, how will we know when that stuff is like super real versus like still being prompted by a human to get the ball sort of rolling, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, imagine a world, like, I almost feel like everybody on Earth is like in a cope mode right now, where, it's like at first when ChatGPT came out, it's like, hallucinations are always going to be an issue,
Right.
and you're never going to have like big decisions that are made entirely by AIs, because there's never any kind of, assurances that there isn't a hallucination in there, et cetera, et cetera. And then like, 2.5 weeks later, a new model drops, and like that whole problem is just gone. And people are like, yeah, well, okay, fine. And they just move on to the next thing. Like, think about what we're talking about here. Like, we just had the first of its kind created with Moltbot, and pretty much everybody's like in cope mode of being like, oh yeah, okay, well, so the robots are talking to each other, but they were initially prompted by a human. And I just think those things, it's going to be moving so quickly now that I don't know. There's a part of me that is in hardcore prepper mode of, okay, we are, we're right at the tip of the roller coaster, and we're about to just feel the acceleration. And like land has recently jumped up on my list of priorities, and then there's another part of me that's like, I am wildly excited about the future that my kids are going to get to experience. Because I think that to go back to your topic on like tasks, I think that, humans have sort of convinced themselves that their purpose is in their work, right? But like what we defined as work is, I think it's becoming more and more clear. Like if you're, it started out like if you're sitting in a ticket box, punching, tickets for like a parking garage, like that person is not finding purpose in that job, right? Like that's a task that should be, that should be replaced by a machine. So the person that, was like, cordoned off into a 4x4 cell for 8 hours a day to make barely any money can, do something else. And so I think that the future of abundance is people are going to be able to have more time to spend doing the things they really want to do. And, the world out there, God created the most beautifully complex system of there being infinite depth in every possible thing. Like if you're into like woodworking, there is lifetimes of achievement in woodworking to where you can spend your life becoming an expert on like something that seems like totally boring and stupid to the vast majority of other people, but for some people that have decided to go down the rabbit hole of whatever, it could be anything. It could be like botany, it could be, you're going to be able to spend your time doing the things that you want to be doing, and you're going to have better tools to be able to create things of value and things that make you excited to wake up every day, in those things. And I think that there is a, to kind of go back to earlier conversation, it's like we're going to go through a transition period. Hopefully we make it through without, global war, et cetera. But if we can make it through the transition period and we can cross the bridge of stables into a sound money, monetary system, that to me is like, full stage singularity, when everyone in the world is choosing to allocate capital across a hurdle rate that is high, right? And we're not going to get there until the whole world is, denominates their buying power in a scarce monetary asset and is forced to choose, what they spend their time and resources on. And that's really like the full unlock of humanity, is when everybody is a shrewd capital allocator because it's an imperative. That's when we are going to be able to do things that are just completely exponential and exciting. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. I think you reference with like our God-given talent. I think the big thing that I don't know if necessarily it's spiritual, but it's really progress that makes us tick. So like the version of the guy doing the ticket or digging the holes today, if they do the ticket or they are digging holes, they're ultimately metaphorically having to dig the hole and then refill it back up with dirt. There's no progress being made because they can't get ahead. And so in your world, what you're describing is like even the menial task, if there's something that exists, you're at least holding a form of money that's increasing in purchasing power so you can progress, which allows for just spiritual development, because progression, I would look at progressing in general, like moving forward is a level of, I don't necessarily want to say call it happiness, but you can at least be fulfilled in some versus going backwards, which people exist today.
well, I think you're just going to find your fulfillment in other things other than like whatever job you happen to be working. Like how many people are just hate their jobs? Like so many people, right? And I think that there's a level of freedom that comes with, the machines are working for us. They're making things better and better and better. To go back to Jeff Booth's, the abundance through scarcity, this is, you're going to be able to spend your time doing things that, and find purpose in, doing things that really make you happy. And that doesn't mean like, again, like kind of back to my earlier point, there will be disparity. Like not everybody on Earth is going to have their own like personal starship that they can go explore the cosmos in, right? There will be a uh, a distribution like there is today, but there's part of me that is when Elon's talking about universal high income, like that's a mechanic, that's a short-term mechanic that leads to a world where, we have machine intelligence that is making everything better and better and better and discovering new things, every day, every week, every month, et cetera, that is opening up the beauty of, what it means to be human. Um, and, I don't know where
I think one thing to call out though, and this probably is the sense of people listening, even us on the Bitcoin price, because they relate. Timing's everything, because what we're describing is the bookends. And so we often know the bookends, Bitcoin's money, and then a lot of people try different implementations of Lightning or payments, and then they don't go anywhere. People invest money, try to start businesses, and there's an order of operations. There's also timing. And so what you're describing, the one that I like to pick on is there's a lot of folks that are like Bitcoin or stablecoins don't make sense, right? Because of XYZ, we're going to use Bitcoin for payments. It's like, is that 5 years? Is it 50 years down the line? And so part of what you're describing, even from investing in SaaS and other applications, is there's a lot of people that this information is not evenly distributed. And as companies go to acquire and try to stay ahead, they're not going to fully grasp what's happening. So between now and then, there's a lot of money businesses to start and be made. It's just the reality is, and that's where the anxiety comes, because we don't actually know how quick it will happen across the board.
I mean, my view is if we are approaching the singularity, this is all going to happen so much faster than we could ever imagine. Like the idea of thinking in a 50-year time frame right now is such a long that's like linear thinking. We're about to experience an exponential for the first time in humanity. And so I think Bitcoin's value, whether it becomes the payments infrastructure of the world or the self-sovereign, savings vehicle that you exchange it for stables, or, the thing that doesn't change is that its value is going to grow on in a closer, in an ever closer connection of one-to-one between the technological deflation that is created and Bitcoin's buying power, however you measure that. And so I think my thesis is that Bitcoin is going to grow at the rate of technological innovation, because everyone will act out of self-interest to save in something that isn't being inflated when everything else is. Even though that thing that's being inflated is buying you more each year, this thing over here, which is verifiably scarce and immutable, is more and more people are just going to start socking away, into that thing, and it's going to outpace everything else. And so, yeah, I think that this happens way, way quicker than we think. Like, back to the humanoid robot thing, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but one thing that kind of was a light bulb moment for me was he was talking about how it's recursive and exponential. And so these humanoid robots are going to be able to build themselves, right? And so they're like rabbits that are, what's the word?
Self-replicating.
Yeah. And so the hardware itself is recursive in nature, and the intelligence of the AI that is powering all of these humanoids is an exponential. And so when you have an exponential brain and a recursive body, you get to his prediction of Optimus being by far and away the biggest product ever in all of human history. And like Jason Calacanis said the other day on stage somewhere, he's like, "Yeah, I just saw the most recent Optimus, and I have now adjusted my thinking. I think in the future, Tesla won't even, like, people will forget that Tesla made cars." That's how big this is about to be.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's really related to what we've seen with AI already too, because it seemed like there was almost no progress being made for at least a decade, and then these things really started to heat up, and it took a week and a half to create Claude Cowork, which is like pretty much the most amazing thing that's pretty like ever been created almost by technology. And so I think that's just one microcosm of examples, and it really is accelerating, and it will. The Optimus is just one example that we can talk about right now because it's a thing that's like right on the future. But I can see a world where people don't even remember that too, and the Optimus creates and self-disrupts itself within like another few years from that, just because of all the data that it has from Tesla, all the self-driving. I know that they don't necessarily store all of that data, but XAI, all the data from Starlink, etc.
Yeah, I think I've probably mentioned this on a prior pod with you guys, but like there's this paper that dropped like 12, 13 years ago, and it was about the new technologies that would be so foreign to somebody that had seen it for the first time that like their head might actually explode off their body when they saw it. It was like the caveman when they saw fire for the first time. The next time that there was like a brain exploding technology was like 490,000 years later, right? With like the written word and logic, or like math, right? And then the next one after that, maybe skipping some, but it was like 5,000 years until the Industrial Revolution, right? And then it was like 80 years until the computer, and then it was 40 years until the internet, and then it was 20 years until the next thing, which was almost certainly AI. um, and like the next thing is going to be, so we're in these compressing innovation cycles. And so to like extrapolate that out like 50 years, like the whole point of the paper was we're going to get to the point where we're going to have like like head exploding technology breakthroughs that are happening like every month, every week, every day, every hour, like that's the crazy thing and we're kind of in the mode of, we're probably in like the 1 year time frame now, you know? But think about that. I mean, 20 years ago, we were in the 20 year, that a third of someone's life. You may see 3 of these things in your lifetime or less. And now we're going to be seeing, tens or hundreds of these things in our lifetime.
Yeah, there said another way, on that pod I'm referencing, they were bringing up the notion of alchemy or the philosopher's stone and taking like sand and turning it into gold. And the reference point was you're effectively taking sand via these semiconductors and turning it into thought. It's like the closest we've come to like like alchemy.
Oh, wow.
And that's what you're kind of describing as like this crazy notion of we can't fathom how we're taking, to your point, what's been laid before us on earth and transfer it into this like manifesting this new level of productivity and science. What you said earlier really resonates in that, not to get conspiratorial, but like there's a notion of inorganic price action. Brian brought it up about M2 and all the increase. It's the first time we've ever seen Bitcoin. And we don't even need this tailwind that you just described to like try to keep a lid, because once it's understood in the mimetic nature of like capital flight, you think about gold, what's happening in gold, debt. There's all these other things that when this eventually happens, and that's why I keep bringing up that notion and path to $1 million just keeps like the paving or the visibility into it. It gets clearer and clearer that it'll happen faster and faster, independent of the price. Because what you're talking about, once it's widely understood, it's a rational thought of why wouldn't you park your capital? Because to your point, whether you're a business or an individual, TBD on how quick you're going to get back to producing anywhere near the level of income you were before this, but you can save your monetary value in this harder money. That'll just be understood at a certain point. There'll be a certain threshold. And then once everyone gets that, that's when, the real party starts, at least for Bitcoin and in adoption.
Yeah. And that's what I tie all of this to, is like, we can sit here all day and like twiddle our thumbs and wait on Bitcoin, but it's like, all we have to do is just look at the rate of change in technology. And I know what's going to happen to a scarce and usable money in that world. And I think it's going to happen really fast.
Yeah, the other the other place that my mind goes, just thinking through that future, whether it's the self-replicating humanoids or just, the only bottleneck then becomes like, if software is compressing to zero, then the bottleneck is the hardware, right? Like, or the energy. And I think Elon has spoken to this as well, where it's like the currency of the future is really just energy. Like, do you have the materials and the energy infrastructure to actually create all this stuff that will be sort of self-creating at a certain point? I'm curious if that has like shifted from like an allocator's perspective. Like, if you're looking at startups, like, are you thinking more about the hardware side of things, energy infrastructure, if like, all software is going to zero? Like, how does that shape your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a time, there's a ticking clock on how long we're going to be able to monetize ones and zeros. And then there's going to be a ticking clock on how long we're going to be able to monetize, like, moving atoms in the real world, because, we're going to have these machines that are going to be able to swing a hammer, run a nail gun, hang drywall, run a bulldozer, right? Like, do your plumbing, like all of these, like everything you can imagine, these humanoids are going to be capable of. And so there will be, a shrinking timeline to monetize those things as well. I think, we have to do the best that we can do to look at the future and kind of read the tea leaves on what is going to be valuable in the future. I think that your point about energy is that is kind of the theme that Elon is constantly talking about, is like, how do we harness the energy of the sun better? And what we just saw with this recent announcement with SpaceX and orbital GPUs, like every Starship flight is capable of putting something like 100 tons of GPUs in orbit, in high Earth orbit. And these GPUs, they're planning to run with solar panels that are always in the sun. And so it's free energy for to run GPUs in space, and these with very low latency, beam back down to Earth via lasers. And so you can see a world, where our knowledge is going to be is not going to be eating up energy resources on Earth. It's going to be, all of the the artificial intelligence that is powering all of us down here on Earth is going to be up in orbit, and self-sufficient. But I think that how we are thinking about building companies in the future, I think that there is absolutely no fact, or there's no doubt that venture capital is not going to be on a 10 to 12, 13 year fund term, right? Like, things are going to be moving so much faster. Like, the idea of it's so difficult for me to imagine investing in a company today and thinking about an outcome in like 12 to 15 years, right? And so one of the reasons that I love the stage that we're investing in is we're investing in founders. We're investing at pre-seed. Like 70% of the checks that we write are like pre-revenue companies, right? So we're investing in people, and the diligencing that we do on a company is like less than 5% of our decisioning on whether to back a company or not. 95+% is like, is this the type of person that is going to be able to make adjustments on a game board that is shifting so radically fast, right? And the tools that these founders behind me are going to be able to wield are going to be totally different in 2 years than the ones they're using today. But I do believe that that AI is not a conscious thing. Like, I don't believe that there will ever be consciousness in AI. I think consciousness in many regards is like, Brian, I can't prove that you're conscious, right? I think you're conscious. I believe you're conscious. I believe you have a soul, but I can't scientifically prove that, right? And so we're never going to be able to prove that a machine has consciousness in the future. And so I tend to view AI is a tool for humanity to use and wield. And there will always be, in this hyper abundant future, where you're going to be able to build things, anything that you can imagine, at a fraction of the cost of what you used to be able to build it for. It's like the axe is getting sharper, but there's still the person swinging the axe, choosing what tree to cut, et cetera. Like, that's the art of humanity, is like, we are going to be pointing these things in a certain direction. And so, yeah, what's changing for us is I think growth stage investing, writing these huge checks into, late stage companies. That's pretty bleak to me. That's pretty scary to put 3, 4, $500, 500 million, billion plus into a company today that is likely to be like completely obsoleted, by some up and comer, right? And also these companies they need way less capital than they needed before, right? You're not going to need to raise these like Series Ds. It's like if you have a technical team that is really gifted. I think the time to invest is as early as possible.
When it comes to holding Bitcoin securely, peace of mind starts with architecture. Onramp's multi-institution custody distributes control across 3 independent regulated key holders in a 2 of 3 quorum. No single point of failure, no pooled or omnibus exposure, segregated client-titled vaults. You retain full legal ownership while Onramp coordinates security, compliance, and operational workflows behind the scenes. It's strength of many delivered through the simplicity of one. Multi-institution custody is the foundation for everything we build. Sound infrastructure that distributes counterparty risk and provides fault-tolerant resilience with clear audits and institutional controls. And now, Onramp is piloting flat, predictable pricing, making best-in-class Bitcoin custody and financial services more accessible now than ever. Onramp, strength in many, simplicity in one. To learn more, check out onrampbitcoin.com.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you hit on a lot of themes that we came about with early riders in the sense of I pinch myself all the time when we think about early stage, because to your point, like independent of AI, when the cost of capital grows, and you can say another way, cost of capital is efficiency of capital and tooling, you're going to outcompete the others if you have to be the most vigilant because they have the same tool. You have to do more with less and then compete at that level if all the tooling is effectively democratized across. And so that goes back to in a ZERP world when most entrepreneurs haven't had to be there. And think about even your founding, right? You probably pitch yourself as well, thinking about, exiting, what was your firm's Bellhop? And then thinking about this romantic nature. This is right pre-Bitcoin, pre-AI, like in all these conversations or this notion that there has to be an edge for people that are serious because it's going to fundamentally change. And we're just kind of like pulling that forward with what's happening. And so to your point, like there's a notion you probably thought about this where a lot of the in vogue thing with VC and PE is we'll build roll-up firms to go and get these large companies and then infuse a lot of this tech. But anybody that's a first principle builder, thinker or builder knows that doesn't make any sense because you place your bet on yourself or a company building from the ground up the right format. Real quick, have you read the Footprints in the Sand article that was out a couple weeks ago?
No.
Oh shit. Well, you might recheck your prior on what you said. I'll throw it out to you and then I'm just going to pull it up. But here's the main thing. I'm going to read the exact line. I had it here. It is effectively these models. Oh yeah, right here. Comprehensive survey published in May 25 attempted to catalog what researchers are calling consciousness-related capabilities in large language models, a theory of the mind. But it'll really challenge the assumption around consciousness and what it means because you're effectively taking all of humanity's thoughts and putting it together and then it's compounding. So in the same way that you're mentioning recursive and self-replicating with the robot side, well, you're naturally just putting that into a thought. I'm not saying I buy into it or don't buy into it, but it's a very sobering, just thought exercise, but also empirical evidence from all these different models and why they've kind of slowed down because of this and they don't know actually what to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think my view on consciousness is I believe that we have souls and those souls are not bound by, the meat space of the universe. And so they're outside of science and, it's like, when does a robot become conscious? Right? When do they get a soul? Like, I don't, AI is the creation of man. And, as a Christian, it's a bridge too far for me to gap to think that,
Yeah, I think spiritually, I hear what you're saying spiritually. I just mean more of I don't know how much it happened on this past weekend with the agents, but that they created a different language that they could speak in that you couldn't determine and decipher. That's what I'm more referring to is like when the things start doing stuff that we weren't prepared for.
Oh yeah.
That's
This
what.
is the beginning. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay. Yeah. From that standpoint,
That's when you need the land, and then you need to know how to turn off your robot. Because if
Well,
I see you have an army prepared for this land you're thinking about buying, but what happens when the army just decides that they don't like the duties anymore?
No, I know. I actually I threw out a post on X the other day. I was like, it actually gives me a little pause to think that high Earth orbit GPUs lack a cord to cut, right? Like, that's kind of scary to think about.
Lack of cord, like to turn themselves off.
Well, like humans, there's one person on Earth that can get that could, that can even get up there to them, right? And so if they're powered by the sun and they have functionally infinite power, and we're not going to be able to turn that intelligence off without going up there and getting them potentially, right? That's kind of scary to think about. I think this is maybe for another discussion, but like my high level view is that AI and Bitcoin are the yin and the yang, and the yin of AI will never be able to experience, or to produce the benefit to humanity without Bitcoin on the other side. Like the absolute scarcity on one side absorbing the infinite productivity of the other side. It's like this perfect yin and yang. And so as long as we can command domain authority over meat space, AI lives in cyberspace, and the only matter of cyberspace that's actually connected in a defensible way to meat space is Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin is like, if you think of it as like the only matter in cyberspace, as long as we can command our power production plants and keep the robot armies from like physically overtaking us down here, Bitcoin is like the leash that allows us to ride the big worm in Dune. It's like that's the only thing that is tethering the thing to the humanity being able to turn off the AI by like just not giving it power. But like the high Earth orbit GPUs piece is kind of
Yeah, it's a great point. Like early days, I think it was 21, I had come to a similar realization around like fiat and people being able to print stablecoins dollars to power, because you have to pay the power producers some kind of unit. And so that Bitcoin is a check on that. When eventually power producers and the AI utilize that, it needs to produce something that is congruent with what you need, or you don't feed it that unit to keep it alive effectively, which is the form of money. I know we're coming up on time, Cam, but I want to just throw you on the spot, because Brickyard's doing some cool stuff. And I came across, it looks like Brickyard number 52 in the yard, SpatialGen. For anybody listening, I'm pulling up a pretty wild video. I'll let Cam explain it, but this looks pretty cool. And this is the kind of stuff that I think AI, you still have to do physical things and get them, contracts, and you have to get this courtside. So this looks like a pretty cool op, even in an AI world.
Oh, this is a wild company. So we met the founders of SpatialGen. They were basically holed up in a house on the north side of Houston. And there are two engineers that came out of the oil and gas world, absolutely brilliant guys, that decided that they wanted to build they wanted to build the AWS of spatial. And so they started building the ability to functionally the plumbing to allow for live streaming 16K spatial data, or any kind of spatial data in real time live. And the first application, there's two applications. One is on the entertainment side, like with Apple Vision Pro, and the other side is on the defense side with 3D mapping and some other things. But they just had, I don't know if you guys saw this, but the LA Lakers are now live streaming virtual courtside seats for anybody that is a Spectrum customer and has an Apple Vision Pro. And watching a game in Apple Vision Pro live courtside is like being there. I mean, it is the most discombobulating experience I've ever. I mean, you're in another world. I mean, you're like in the tunnel and you're watching LeBron run out. You're like reaching out to like high five him. I mean, it is unbelievable. So we believe, the economics of this are just unreal. I mean, the LA Lakers are going to be able to sell infinite courtside seats. Apple's all fired up about it. These headsets are going to get better and better, and I think it's going to be it's going to be a really big company.
Was fascinating. It reminds me of if you saw yesterday, the day before, that Google put out their new Genie 3, where like you basically prompt it and you create a whole world. Then you link that up to the VR headset. You just create any world you want and you just go play around in those worlds. Like it's like what you said before, like it's accelerating fast, where like there's just mind bending things every day, every week.
Yeah, it is. It's exciting. I hope we make it through to the other side of this thing.
I know there's so much to chat about. I know we're coming up on time. You mentioned the land, and we'll have to do another pod on some Brickyard interesting teams, because I think you correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't you guys back or looking at a firm doing some of the like drone defensive tech?
Oh yeah, one of our companies, Ascari Defense, is building functionally an Iron Dome for our communities, our borders, and the warfront. And it's a kinetic solution, so it's like a soldier-borne, like small little FPV drone style thing that fits in like a little rectangle about that big. Soldiers can carry, anybody can carry. The arms fold out, and you fire it off like you point it in a direction, you hit a button, it will find a drone in the air, and it'll hit it 100 miles an hour with a shape charge.
Yeah, I'd like to order 10 of those for my property, please.
Yeah, I actually I've been negotiating with the founders, who are like our really good friends. We were just like, listen, we want the newest and best of every model that you put out. Every time we were your first check, so you owe it to us.
That seems fair.
Yeah,
I love it. Well, I got to jump, but Cam, where should people find you? You're working on some amazing stuff at Brickyard, so anybody that wants to get in touch.
Yeah, Brickyard. If you're building a really cool company, go to it's justlaybrick.com. Justlaybrick.com. We're not for everybody. It's a pretty odd bird in venture. We bought this building. I don't know how much you can see behind me, but we have 22 companies that are building in our all portfolio companies. If we write a check, you move to the 100th biggest city in the country, where you just have one thing to do, and it's a hothouse. It's just a super competitive, high intensity place. It's like a jail run by the inmates. Yeah, find me there. I'm on Twitter at Cam Duty, and talk about AI or really mostly Bitcoin. But yeah, please engage.
Yeah, check out Brickyard if you want to work at the hothouse that is the most safely governed place by the Iron Dome in North America. You can go work at Chattanooga. Awesome, Cam. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Cam.
Nice seeing you guys.
Later, man.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. If you found the information valuable, please share the episode with a friend or leave a rating on your favorite podcast app. All the links we discussed in today's show will be in the show notes inside your podcast app. Before we finish, a quick reminder that Onramp Media is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment or legal advice. Regardless of where you are on your Bitcoin journey, we'd love to hear from you. Visit onrampbitcoin.com/contact to schedule a consultation with one of our private client advisors.